I never thought a backup generator would become the center of a legal nightmare that would expose corruption, theft, and eventually land 3 people in jail. But here we are. My name is Blake Winters, and I live in Meadowbrook, a planned community just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I bought my house here 3 years ago, drawn by the manicured lawns, the decent schools, and what seemed like a friendly neighborhood atmosphere. The homeowners association seemed reasonable enough at first, just the typical rules about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors. I should have known better. Last March, a massive storm system rolled through the Carolinas, knocking out power for thousands of residents. I work from home as a software engineer, and losing power means losing income. After sitting in the dark for 2 days during that outage, I decided I needed a backup solution. I did my research and settled on a Honda EU 7000 IS inverter generator, one of the quieter models on the market. It cost me nearly $3,000, but it was worth every penny for the peace of mind. The generator arrived in late April, and I set it up on my covered front porch. I know what you are thinking, but hear me out. My backyard has a steep slope and drainage issues, plus my electrical panel is on the front of the house. Running extension cords through the house would have been a fire hazard, and having an electrician install a transfer switch in the back would have cost another $5,000. The front porch made the most sense logistically and financially. I also was not stupid about it. I bolted the generator to the concrete porch with heavy-duty anchors and chains. I built a weatherproof cover for it that matched my house's exterior. It looked professional and neat, not like I had just thrown some equipment on my porch. The thing barely made any noise when it ran, and I only used it for testing once a month to make sure it worked. Before I even installed it, I checked the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The CCRs mentioned nothing about generators. There was a vague clause about not storing unsightly equipment visible from the street, but my generator was housed in a custom enclosure that matched my home's aesthetic. I even took photos and kept documentation of everything. 2 weeks after I installed the generator, I got my first notice. It came in a bright yellow envelope, the kind the Meadowbrook HOA used for violation notices. Inside was a letter from Patricia Henderson, the HOA president, informing me that I was in violation of Section 8.4 of the CCRs regarding exterior modifications and equipment storage. I read Section 8.4 3 times. It talked about satellite dishes, above-ground pools, and industrial equipment. My generator was not industrial, it was residential. I called Patricia that same day. "Henderson Residence," she answered, her voice already carrying that tone of superiority I would come to know so well. "Hi, Patricia. This is Blake Winters from 412 Maple Drive. I received a violation notice about my generator, and I wanted to discuss it with you." "There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Winters. You are in violation of the CCRs. The generator must be removed from view immediately." I reviewed Section 8.4, and I do not see how my generator violates it. It is not industrial equipment, and it is properly housed in a cover that matches my home. The CCRs do not specifically prohibit generators. The board has determined it is a violation, she said, as if that settled everything. "You have 14 days to come into compliance or you will be fined. Can I at least attend the next board meeting to present my case?" She sighed heavily. "The board meets the first Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. in the community center. But I can tell you right now, Mr. Winters, the decision has already been made." That should have been my first red flag, but I was still operating under the assumption that reasonable people could reach reasonable conclusions. The board meeting was exactly as unpleasant as I expected. The Meadowbrook Community Center was a bland beige building with folding chairs and fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. About 15 other homeowners were there, most looking as frustrated as I felt. Patricia Henderson sat at the front table with 4 other board members: Ronald Gibson, the vice president, Margaret Walsh, the secretary, David Porter, the treasurer, and Susan Reynolds, a member at large. Patricia was probably in her mid-50s, with that particular hairstyle that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and a permanent expression of disapproval. I waited through 45 minutes of tedious business, listening to them debate whether the community pool should open Memorial Day weekend or the weekend before. Finally, they got to new business and violations. Blake Winters, 412 Maple Drive, generator violation, Patricia announced, reading from her notes. I stood up. "Hi, everyone. I am here to appeal the violation notice. I have reviewed the CCRs extensively, and I do not believe my generator violates any specific provision. I have documentation and photos showing that it is professionally installed and housed in an enclosure that matches my home's exterior." "Mr. Winters," Patricia interrupted, "the board has already reviewed your case. The generator is an eyesore and violates the spirit of our community standards." The spirit. The CCRs do not mention generators at all, and my enclosure is actually more attractive than several other items I have seen in the neighborhood. There is a house on Oak Street with a rusted barbecue grill sitting on the front porch, and another on Birch Avenue with plastic storage bins visible from the street. Ronald Gibson leaned forward. "Those issues will be addressed in due course. We are discussing your violation tonight." "But why is mine a violation and those are not? What is the specific standard you are applying?" Patricia's face was turning red. "Mr. Winters, you are disrupting this meeting. The board has made its decision. You have 14 days to remove the generator from view, or you will face fines of $100 per day. Next item on the agenda." "This is not fair," I said, my voice rising. "You cannot arbitrarily decide what is and is not a violation. I have a right to appeal to the full membership." "According to the bylaws, the board has full authority to interpret and enforce the CCRs," Margaret Walsh said, looking at me over her reading glasses. "If you wish to challenge the board's decision, you can file a lawsuit. Now please sit down." I sat down, my hands shaking with frustration. I stayed for the rest of the meeting, listening to them approve a new landscaping contract and debate whether to repair or replace the tennis court nets. When it was over, I approached Patricia directly. "Patricia, can we talk about this rationally? I bought this generator for emergency preparedness. The next time we have a major storm, I need to be able to work and keep my refrigerator running." "Then put it in your garage like a normal person," she said, gathering her papers. "It needs to be near my electrical panel for safety reasons. And the exhaust fumes would be dangerous in an enclosed space." "Not my problem, Mr. Winters. Rules are rules." She walked away, leaving me standing there. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried everything. I submitted a formal written appeal to the board. I cited specific sections of North Carolina HOA law. I even got a letter from an electrician explaining why the front porch location was the safest option for my specific home configuration. The board denied everything. On day 15, I received another notice informing me that I was being fined $100 per day until I came into compliance. I immediately contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Richard Chen, and his office was in downtown Charlotte. "These cases are always difficult," Richard told me during our first consultation. "Legally, you are probably in the right. The CCRs do not specifically prohibit generators, and North Carolina law requires HOAs to be reasonable in their enforcement. But fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. How expensive are we talking? If this goes to court, you could be looking at $20,000 to $30,000 in legal fees, possibly more, and that is if you win. I felt sick. So they can just bully me into compliance because fighting them costs more than the generator is worth. Unfortunately, that is how many HOAs operate. They know most homeowners cannot afford to fight them. Richard leaned back in his chair. You have a few options. You can comply and move the generator, you can pay the fines while we negotiate, or you can fight this in court and hope for the best. I will pay the fines for now, I said. But I want you to send them a letter making it clear that I am not accepting their interpretation of the CCRs, and that I reserve the right to pursue legal action. Richard drafted a strongly worded letter, and I paid him $1,500 for his time. Meanwhile, the fines kept accumulating. $100 a day adds up fast. After a month, I owed $3,000. I paid it under protest, documenting everything. Then things got weird. It was a Tuesday morning in early June when I left for a meeting in downtown Charlotte. I had a generator test scheduled for that weekend, so I had checked on it that morning before I left. Everything was fine, locked and secure in its enclosure on the porch. I got home around 6 p.m. and something felt wrong immediately. The enclosure door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. My stomach dropped as I ran up the porch steps. The generator was gone. The security chains had been cut with heavy-duty bolt cutters. The anchors were still in the concrete, but the chains were severed. Someone had stolen a $3,000 generator in broad daylight from my front porch. I immediately called the police. 2 officers from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department showed up about 40 minutes later. They took my statement, photographed the cut chains, and gave me a case number. Any idea who might have taken it? The younger officer asked. No, but I have had an ongoing dispute with my HOA about this generator. They have been fining me and demanding I remove it. The officers exchanged glances. You think your HOA stole your generator? I do not know, but it seems suspicious. They took down Patricia Henderson's name and contact information, but I could tell they did not take the theory seriously. To them, it was just another property theft case that would probably never be solved. After they left, I sat on my porch steps, trying to process what had happened. I had spent $3,000 on the generator, $1,500 on a lawyer, and another $3,000 in HOA fines. I was out $7,500 and had nothing to show for it. Then I remembered something. When I had purchased the generator, I had been paranoid about theft. I had hidden an Apple Air tag inside the housing, tucked into a spot where it would not interfere with the engine but would be nearly impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. I grabbed my phone and opened the Find My app. The Air tag was still active, and it was pinging from a location about half a mile away, somewhere in the neighborhood. My heart started pounding. I zoomed in on the map. The location was showing the generator at 1847 Willow Creek Drive, the address of the Meadowbrook Community Center where the HOA stored maintenance equipment. I took screenshots of everything, showing the Air tag location with timestamps. Then I called Richard Chen. "You are not going to believe this," I said when he answered. "My generator was stolen, and the GPS tracker I hid in it is pinging from the HOA community center." "Hold on. You are saying the HOA stole your generator? The GPS does not lie. It is sitting in their maintenance shed right now." There was a long pause. "Blake, this changes everything. If the HOA actually stole your property, that is criminal theft." You need to call the police back immediately and show them this evidence. I called the non-emergency line and explained the situation. The dispatcher said an officer would be out within the hour. While I waited, I kept monitoring the air tag location. It had not moved. The same 2 officers from earlier showed up, looking skeptical. You said you have new information about the stolen generator. I do. I had a GPS tracking device hidden in the generator, and it is currently showing the location as the HOA Community Center maintenance shed. I showed them my phone screen with the pinging location. The older officer, whose nameplate read Morrison, studied the screen carefully. And you are certain this tracker is accurate? Apple AirTags are accurate to within a few meters. You can see the timestamp. It has been there since this afternoon. This is serious accusation, Mr. Winters. You are saying your HOA committed theft. I am saying my generator is at that location. Whether they stole it or someone stole it and put it there, I do not know. But it is there. Officer Morrison looked at his partner. We will need to investigate this. We cannot just go searching HOA property without cause, but this GPS data might be enough for a warrant. How long will that take? Could be a few days. We will need to present this to a judge and explain the situation. In the meantime, keep monitoring that tracker. If it moves, call us immediately. They left, and I spent the rest of the night checking the Find My app every 15 minutes. The generator stayed put at the community center. The next morning, I got a call from a Detective Sarah Brennan with the CMPD. She wanted to meet with me to discuss the case. We met at a coffee shop near my house. Detective Brennan was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had the direct, no-nonsense manner of someone who had seen it all. "Tell me everything about your dispute with the HOA," she said after we sat down with our coffees. I walked her through the whole story, from installing the generator to the violation notices, the board meeting, the fines, and finally the theft. I showed her all my documentation, including the CCRs, the violation notices, my appeal letters, and the GPS tracking data. "This is quite a paper trail," she said, flipping through the documents I had brought. "And you are certain the HOA had motive to take the generator? They have been harassing me for months about it. They wanted it gone, and now it is gone, and it is sitting in their maintenance shed." Here is the problem, Mr. Winters. Just because the generator is on HOA property does not necessarily mean the HOA stole it. Someone else could have stolen it and dumped it there. Why would a thief take a $3,000 generator and dump it at a community center instead of selling it? "Good point," she acknowledged. "I am going to request a search warrant for the HOA maintenance shed. If your generator is there, we will find it. But I need you to understand that this might not go anywhere. Even if we find the generator, proving who took it will be difficult." "I understand. I just want my property back." The warrant took 3 days to process. During that time, I monitored the air tag constantly. The generator stayed in the same location, which actually worked in my favor. If someone had stolen it intending to sell it, they would have moved it by now. On Friday morning, Detective Brennan called me. "We have the warrant. We are executing it this afternoon at 3 p.m. I would like you to be there to identify your property." I met Detective Brennan and 4 other officers at the Meadowbrook Community Center at 2:45 p.m. Patricia Henderson was already there, along with David Porter, the HOA treasurer. Patricia looked furious. "This is outrageous," she was saying as I walked up. "You cannot just come onto HOA property with a search warrant based on some ridiculous accusation." "Madam, we have a valid warrant signed by a judge," Detective Brennan said calmly. "Mr. Winters' generator was stolen, and we have evidence suggesting it may be on these premises. We are just here to look. This is harassment. I am calling our lawyer." You are welcome to do that, madam. But we are executing this warrant now. The maintenance shed was a large metal building behind the community center. David Porter unlocked it, his hands shaking slightly. Inside were lawn mowers, landscaping equipment, pool supplies, and various other maintenance items. And in the back corner, partially covered by a tarp, was my generator. That is it, I said immediately. That is my generator. Detective Brennan walked over and pulled back the tarp. The Honda generator sat there, but something was wrong, very wrong. The control panel had been smashed. The fuel tank had been punctured. Oil was leaking out onto the concrete floor. Someone had taken a hammer or a crowbar to it, systematically destroying every functional component. The generator was not just stolen, it was completely destroyed. Jesus, Detective Brennan muttered. Someone really did a number on this thing. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Even if I got the generator back, it was worthless now. The repairs would cost more than buying a new one. Mr. Winters, can you positively identify this as your property? Detective Brennan asked. I knelt down, my hands shaking. Yes, there is the serial number on the side panel. I pointed to the metal plate with the serial number that matched my purchase receipt, and there should be an air tag inside the housing compartment here. I reached into the small access panel where I had hidden the tracker. It was still there, tucked into its hiding spot. Detective Brennan took photos of everything, documenting the serial number, the damage, and the air tag. Then she turned to Patricia Henderson and David Porter. I need to ask you both some questions. When was the last time either of you were in this shed? I do not come in here, Patricia said quickly. The maintenance staff handles all of this. Who has access to this shed? The board members all have keys, David said quietly. And the landscaping company. Who is the landscaping company? Green Valley Landscaping. They do all our grounds maintenance. Detective Brennan made notes. I am going to need a list of everyone who has accessed this shed in the past week. Security camera footage if you have it. We do not have cameras here, Patricia said. There was never a need. Convenient, I muttered. Patricia glared at me. Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Winters? You are the one who has been demanding I remove this generator for months. Now it shows up here destroyed. What am I supposed to think? I had nothing to do with this. This is your own fault for leaving expensive equipment on your porch where anyone could take it. Detective Brennan stepped between us. Everyone calm down. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Porter, I am going to need you both to come to the station to give formal statements. This is now a criminal investigation into theft and vandalism. I am calling our lawyer, Patricia repeated, pulling out her phone. The police impounded my generator as evidence, which meant I could not even take the destroyed husk home. I gave my statement at the police station, providing all my documentation and explaining the timeline of events. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Brennan conducted her investigation. She interviewed all the board members, the maintenance staff, and the landscaping company employees. She pulled phone records and tried to establish who had been at the community center on the day my generator was stolen. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. Tony Marquez, one of the maintenance workers for the HOA, came forward with information. Detective Brennan called me on a Tuesday evening. Mr. Winters, we have had a significant development. One of the maintenance employees has agreed to give a statement. He says he witnessed Patricia Henderson and Ronald Gibson, the HOA vice president, putting your generator in the shed the day it was stolen. Holy shit, I said. He saw them. Yes, he was doing some work at the community center and saw them unload it from Mr. Gibson's truck. He said they told him it was old equipment being stored for disposal. He thought it was strange but did not question it. Can he testify to this? he has given a sworn statement, and there is more. We pulled phone records and found that Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Gibson exchanged over 30 text messages the day before your generator was stolen. They are trying to get a warrant for the content of those messages now. What happens next? If we can establish that they stole and destroyed your property, they will be charged with felony theft and vandalism. Given the value of the generator and the premeditated nature of the act, they are looking at serious charges. Good, I said. They should not get away with this. The warrant for the phone records came through 3 days later. The text messages were damning. Patricia and Ronald had explicitly discussed taking my generator and destroying it. Patricia: he is not going to remove it voluntarily. We need to take action. Ronald: what do you suggest? Patricia: remove it ourselves, make the problem go away. Ronald: that's theft, Patricia. Patricia: it is code enforcement. He has been in violation for months. We have the authority to remove items that violate the CCRs. Ronald: I do not know. This seems risky. Patricia: are you with me or not? I am tired of him making a mockery of this board. The texts went on, with Patricia eventually convincing Ronald to help her. They planned the theft for a Tuesday when they knew I would be away at a meeting in Charlotte. Ronald had a truck, and they arranged to meet at my house at 10 a.m. There were more texts after the theft. Ronald: what do we do with it now? Patricia: destroy it. I do not want any evidence of this thing existing. Ronald: you want me to destroy a $3,000 generator? Patricia: yes. Make sure it cannot be used again. Then we store the pieces in the shed until we can dispose of them. The messages continued, detailing how Ronald had used a sledgehammer to smash the control panel and puncture the fuel tank. They had planned to dismantle it completely and throw the pieces away over time, but they had not gotten around to it before the police showed up with a warrant. Based on this evidence, Detective Brennan arrested both Patricia Henderson and Ronald Gibson on charges of felony theft, felony vandalism, and conspiracy. They were both released on bond pending trial, but the damage to their reputations was immediate and catastrophic. The story hit the local news within days. HOA president arrested for stealing homeowner's generator was the headline on Channel 9. The story went viral on social media, with people sharing it and expressing outrage at the HOA's behavior. I did several interviews, explaining what had happened and showing the paper trail of harassment and violations. The Meadowbrook HOA held an emergency meeting and voted to remove both Patricia and Ronald from the board. A recall election was scheduled, and 3 new board members were elected, all of whom ran on a platform of transparency and fair enforcement. Meanwhile, my lawyer Richard Chen filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia Henderson, Ronald Gibson, and the Meadowbrook HOA itself. We were suing for the cost of the generator, the legal fees, the HOA fines I had paid, damages for emotional distress, and punitive damages. The civil case moved faster than the criminal case. The HOA's insurance company, not wanting the negative publicity and facing overwhelming evidence, offered a settlement. They agreed to pay me $35,000, which covered all my costs plus damages. They also agreed to revise the CCRs to explicitly allow backup generators installed according to manufacturer specifications. I accepted the settlement. It was not about the money at that point. It was about the principle. The new HOA board also refunded all the fines I had paid, adding another $3,000. The criminal case went to trial 8 months later. I testified about the timeline of events, the harassment, and the discovery of my destroyed generator. Tony Marquez, the maintenance worker, testified about seeing Patricia and Ronald with the generator. The text messages were entered into evidence, and they were devastating. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she believed she had the authority to remove items that violated the CCRs, but the text messages showed clear knowledge that what they were doing was illegal. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia Henderson was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though the sentence was suspended to 18 months of home confinement, 3 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service. She was also ordered to pay restitution for the generator. Ronald Gibson received a similar sentence, though his was reduced slightly because he had been somewhat coerced by Patricia. The HOA also faced consequences. The new board hired a management company to handle violations and enforcement, removing the power from individual board members to make arbitrary decisions. They implemented an appeals process that gave homeowners actual due process before fines could be levied. And they changed the culture of the community, making it clear that the HOA existed to serve the homeowners, not to harass them. As for me, I bought a new generator with the settlement money. The new HOA board approved my installation plan in writing before I even ordered it. I built an even nicer enclosure, added some decorative landscaping around it, and made sure everything was documented and approved. The generator sits on my front porch today, ready for the next power outage. Every time I look at it, I think about what a nightmare this whole situation was, but also how important it is to stand up for your rights. I could have just moved the generator and let the HOA bully me into compliance. Instead, I fought back and justice was served. I still live in Meadowbrook. The neighborhood is actually a much better place now. The new HOA board is reasonable and transparent. They enforce the rules fairly and consistently. There is no more arbitrary harassment or selective enforcement. I occasionally see Patricia Henderson around the neighborhood during her home confinement period. She wears an ankle monitor and cannot leave her property except for approved activities like medical appointments and grocery shopping. We do not speak. There is nothing to say. The whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, document everything. I kept every email, every letter, every receipt, and every piece of correspondence. That documentation was crucial in building my case. Second, know your rights. I read the CCRs thoroughly and knew exactly what they did and did not say. Third, do not be afraid to fight back when you are in the right. It cost me time, money, and stress, but in the end, justice prevailed. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to work, even if it took longer than I wanted. The police investigated thoroughly, the prosecutor pursued the charges, and the jury delivered the right verdict. The civil system also worked, with the insurance company recognizing their liability and settling appropriately. I have become something of a local advocate for homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. People reach out to me regularly asking for advice on how to handle their own situations. I always tell them the same thing. Know your rights, document everything, and do not be afraid to stand up to bullies. The generator incident also led to broader changes in how HOAs operate in North Carolina. State legislators, hearing about cases like mine, introduced new laws providing better protections for homeowners and limiting HOA authority. The laws require HOAs to provide specific written standards for violations, implement fair appeals processes, and face actual consequences for overstepping their authority. Richard Chen, my lawyer, told me that my case has been cited in several other HOA disputes across the state. It has become something of a landmark case, showing that HOAs cannot simply do whatever they want without consequences. I never intended to be a test case for HOA law, but I am glad something positive came from the nightmare I went through. The settlement money covered all my costs, and then some. After paying Richard his legal fees and reimbursing myself for all the expenses, I still had about $15,000 left over. I donated $5,000 to a legal aid organization that helps low-income homeowners fight HOA disputes. The rest went into my savings account, an emergency fund for the next time life throws me a curveball. My relationship with my neighbors improved significantly after the whole ordeal. Many of them had their own issues with Patricia Henderson and the old board, but they had been too afraid to speak up. Once the story became public, and people saw that you could fight back successfully, several other homeowners came forward with their own complaints about selective enforcement and harassment. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Dorothy Chen who lived 2 streets over, told me that Patricia had been fining her for years over minor infractions while ignoring identical violations by her friends in the neighborhood. Another homeowner, a young couple with small children, said they had been fined for having toys visible in their front yard, while other homes had outdoor furniture and decorations that were just as visible. The new board reviewed all pending violations and fines from the previous year and found numerous examples of selective enforcement and arbitrary decision-making. They voided many of the fines and implemented new standards that were clear, specific, and applied equally to everyone. The community began to feel like an actual community again, instead of a police state. People were not afraid to put out holiday decorations or have their kids play in the front yard. The HOA went back to its intended purpose, maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable standards that preserved property values without making people feel like they were living under constant surveillance. I testified before the North Carolina State Legislature when they were considering new HOA reform laws. I told my story to the committee, showing them the documentation of what I had gone through. Several legislators were shocked by the level of harassment and the brazen theft and destruction of property. "This is exactly why we need these reforms," said Representative Michael Thompson, who had introduced the legislation. Homeowners associations have become little fiefdoms where board members can abuse their power without consequence. Mr. Winter's case shows what can happen when there are no checks and balances. The reforms passed with bipartisan support. The new laws required HOAs to provide detailed written standards for all violations, implement formal appeals processes with neutral third-party arbitration, and face mandatory insurance requirements to cover potential liability. Board members who abused their authority could now be held personally liable, not just the HOA as an entity. I also worked with a local news investigative team that did a broader story on HOA abuses in the Charlotte area. They found dozens of cases similar to mine, where board members had overstepped their authority, selectively enforced rules, or used their positions for personal vendettas. The series won a regional Emmy Award and prompted even more reforms. The irony is that I never wanted to be an activist or an advocate. I just wanted to have a backup generator so I could keep my refrigerator running during power outages. But sometimes, life pushes you into a role you never expected, and you have to rise to the occasion. Looking back on the whole experience, the most frustrating part was how unnecessary it all was. If Patricia Henderson had just been reasonable from the start, none of this would have happened. If she had worked with me to find a compromise solution, maybe requiring some additional screening or landscaping around the generator, I would have been happy to comply. Instead, she decided to dig in and treat a minor issue as a personal crusade. Her inability to compromise or see reason ultimately destroyed her reputation, cost her thousands of dollars in legal fees and restitution, and landed her in home confinement with a criminal record. Ronald Gibson, who went along with her scheme, suffered similar consequences. Both of them lost their standing in the community and faced financial ruin. Meanwhile, I got a new generator, a significant financial settlement, and the satisfaction of knowing that I stood up for what was right. The community benefited from reforms that made the HOA more accountable and fair. And dozens of other homeowners across North Carolina gained better legal protections against HOA overreach. The destruction of my original generator still bothers me when I think about it. It was not just the financial loss, though $3,000 is nothing to sneeze at. It was the maliciousness of it, the deliberate destruction of property out of pure spite. Patricia and Ronald did not just take the generator, they smashed it with a sledgehammer, ensuring it could never be used again. That level of vindictiveness is hard to comprehend. The police photos of the destroyed generator were hard to look at. The control panel completely shattered, the fuel tank punctured, oil leaking everywhere, wires cut and pulled out. It looked like someone had taken out their rage on an inanimate object. The detective told me she had seen a lot of property crimes, but the level of destruction was unusual. Most thieves steal items to sell them, not to destroy them. That was how the prosecutors proved premeditation and malice, which elevated the charges to felonies. If Patricia and Ronald had just taken the generator and hidden it, they might have faced lesser charges. But the deliberate destruction showed that this was not a misguided attempt at code enforcement. It was criminal vandalism motivated by personal animosity. During the trial, Patricia tried to claim that she had been under tremendous stress serving as HOA president and had not been thinking clearly. Her lawyer painted her as a dedicated volunteer who had devoted countless hours to the community and had simply made a mistake in judgment. The prosecutor was not buying it. This was not a mistake in judgment, the prosecutor argued in closing statements. This was a calculated, premeditated theft and destruction of property. The defendant exchanged dozens of text messages planning this crime. She waited until she knew Mr. Winters would be away from home. She recruited an accomplice. She systematically destroyed the generator to ensure it could never be used again. This was not stress or poor judgment. This was malice. The jury agreed. The forewoman later told a reporter that the text messages were the deciding factor. Once we read those messages, it was clear this was intentional. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and she did it anyway. Ronald Gibson's trial was separate but equally damning. His lawyer tried to argue that Patricia had pressured him into participating, painting him as a reluctant accomplice. But the text messages showed that, while he had some initial hesitation, he ultimately participated fully in both the theft and the destruction. The jury found him guilty on all counts as well. The sentencing hearing was emotional. I gave a victim impact statement describing how the theft and harassment had affected my life, my work, and my sense of security in my own home. I talked about the financial costs, the stress, and the violation of having someone deliberately destroy my property. This was not just about a generator, I told the judge. This was about people in positions of power, abusing that power to harass and intimidate someone who dared to disagree with them. If this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. These defendants need to face real consequences so that other HOA board members understand that they are not above the law. Patricia Henderson also made a statement, claiming to be remorseful and asking for leniency. "I dedicated years of my life to this community," she said, crying. "I made a terrible mistake and I am deeply sorry. I never intended for things to go this far. The judge was not sympathetic. Mrs. Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to enforce the rules fairly and reasonably. Instead, you used your position to harass Mr. Winters and ultimately to commit serious crimes. Your actions have damaged not just Mr. Winters, but the entire community's faith in the HOA system. While I am not going to send you to prison given your age and lack of prior criminal history, you will face significant consequences. The home confinement sentence was actually quite restrictive. Patricia could only leave her house for work, which she did not have anymore since she had lost her job over the scandal, medical appointments, religious services, and grocery shopping. She had to wear an ankle monitor that tracked her location at all times. Any violation of the confinement rules would result in her going to prison to serve the full 2-year sentence. Ronald Gibson got a similar sentence. Both also had to complete 500 hours of community service, which the judge specified should be actual manual labor, not sitting in an office. They spent their community service hours doing things like picking up trash along highways, cleaning public parks, and helping with habitat restoration projects. The financial restitution was also significant. Patricia and Ronald each had to pay me for half the value of the destroyed generator, plus they had to pay court costs and fees. Combined with their own legal fees, both of them spent well over $50,000 each on this debacle. Patricia had to sell her house in Meadowbrook and move to a smaller apartment. Ronald took out a second mortgage. The HOA's insurance company ended up paying my settlement, but they dropped the HOA's coverage after the payout. The new board had to find a different insurance carrier, and the premiums were significantly higher due to the claims history. Some homeowners grumbled about the increased HOA fees necessary to cover the higher insurance costs, but most understood that the old board's actions had caused the problem. The new board, to their credit, handled the situation well. They were transparent about the financial impact and worked to cut costs in other areas to minimize the fee increase. They also implemented better financial controls and oversight to prevent future board members from abusing their authority. I was asked to serve on the new board, but I declined. I had no desire to spend my evenings attending HOA meetings and dealing with neighborhood disputes. I was happy to advise and provide input when asked, but I wanted to get back to my normal life. The whole ordeal had consumed nearly a year of my life, and I was ready to move on. My new generator has worked flawlessly. We have had 2 power outages since I installed it, and both times it fired right up and kept my essential appliances running. I test it monthly, running it for about 30 minutes to make sure everything is working properly. The neighbors actually appreciate it now. Several have asked me for advice on buying their own generators. The enclosure I built for the new generator is even nicer than the first one. I used cedar siding that matches my house trim, added some decorative lattice work, and planted some shrubs around the base to integrate it into the landscaping. It looks like an intentional part of the home's design, not like equipment storage. Several neighbors have complimented me on how nice it looks. I also installed security cameras covering my front porch and driveway. After having property stolen once, I was not taking any chances. The cameras are connected to cloud storage and my phone, so I get instant alerts if there is any motion detected when I am not home. It gives me peace of mind, even though I do not really expect any more problems. The Meadowbrook community has continued to improve under the new board leadership. They have organized social events like neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties that bring people together. They have improved communication, sending out monthly newsletters, and maintaining an active website with transparent financial reports. They have even created a suggestion box where homeowners can provide input on rules and policies. One of the best changes was the creation of an architectural review committee that actually works with homeowners on exterior modifications, instead of just rejecting everything. A young couple down the street wanted to add solar panels to their roof, something the old board would have automatically denied as an unapproved modification. The new ARC worked with them on the placement and appearance, and the panels were installed with minimal fuss. Several other homes have since added solar panels as well. The neighborhood's property values have actually increased since the reforms. Potential buyers researching the area see the news coverage of the changes and reforms and view it as a positive. A well-run HOA with clear rules and fair enforcement is actually an asset, while an HOA with a reputation for harassment and abuse is a liability. I have stayed in touch with several of the homeowners who came forward with their own stories of HOA abuse. We formed an informal support network, sharing information and advice. One of them, a guy named James Wu, who had been fighting the old board over a fence dispute, successfully sued and won a significant settlement. Another, a single mother named Rebecca Torres, who had been harassed over her lawn maintenance during a period when she was dealing with a serious illness, got her fines voided and received an apology from the new board. The legal aid organization I donated to has used some of the money to create a HOA dispute hotline where homeowners can call and get free initial consultations with lawyers. They have helped dozens of people across North Carolina navigate HOA disputes and understand their rights. They even created a guide called Your Rights as a Homeowner that explains HOA law in plain English. Richard Chen, my lawyer, has become something of a specialist in HOA law. He gets referrals regularly from people dealing with similar situations. He told me that my case changed his practice, making him realize how much need there was for lawyers willing to take on HOAs. Most lawyers avoid HOA cases because they tend to be expensive and time-consuming with uncertain outcomes. But Richard saw that there was real injustice happening, and lawyers needed to step up. The media attention from my case also led to broader awareness of HOA issues. Consumer protection reporters at news outlets across the state started investigating HOA abuses in their areas. They found similar patterns of selective enforcement, harassment, and abuse of power. Several other criminal cases were prosecuted after investigative reporting uncovered evidence of theft, fraud, and embezzlement by HOA board members. One particularly egregious case in Raleigh involved a board treasurer who had embezzled over $200,000 from HOA funds over 5 years. The news coverage of my case had prompted homeowners to demand audits of their HOA finances, which led to the discovery of the embezzlement. The treasurer went to prison, and the HOA recovered most of the stolen funds through insurance and asset seizure. These cases created momentum for even more reforms. The North Carolina HOA law now requires annual independent audits for any HOA with more than 50 homes. Board members have to undergo background checks. There are term limits to prevent people from entrenching themselves in power for decades, and there are whistleblower protections for homeowners who report misconduct. I have been asked to speak at several events about my experience. I spoke at a statewide HOA conference, at a legislative hearing, and at several community meetings. I always emphasize the same points. Document everything, know your rights, and do not be afraid to fight back when you are in the right. I also encourage people to get involved in their HOAs and run for the board themselves if they want to see changes. The one thing I wish I had done differently was getting my own insurance to cover the generator. My homeowner's policy did not cover property theft from outside the house unless there was forced entry into the building itself. If I had added a rider covering the generator specifically, I would have been made whole immediately instead of having to fight for months to recover my losses. I tell everyone now to make sure their insurance covers any valuable equipment they have outside. Time has healed some of the anger and frustration I felt during the ordeal, but I still get upset thinking about the sheer stupidity of it all. Patricia Henderson destroyed her own life over a generator that was not even really a problem. If she had left me alone, she would still be HOA president, respected in the community, living in her nice house. Instead, she has a criminal record, financial ruin, and the permanent stain of being known as the HOA president who stole and destroyed a homeowner's property. I see her sometimes when I am out walking my dog. She is usually in her front yard doing gardening, her ankle monitor visible when she kneels down. We do not acknowledge each other. There is nothing to say. She made her choices and faces the consequences. Ronald Gibson moved away after his home confinement ended. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he and his wife divorced over the whole situation and the financial stress. He sold his house and moved to another state, trying to start over. I almost feel sorry for him because he seemed to be following Patricia's lead rather than being the instigator, but he still made the choice to participate. He could have said no. The community center maintenance shed, scene of the crime, has been cleaned out and reorganized. The new board hired a professional management company to handle all maintenance, and they keep detailed logs of who accesses the shed and when. There are now security cameras installed covering the entire facility. The HOA learned their lesson about accountability and documentation. My front porch has become something of a tourist attraction in a weird way. People drive by to see the generator that launched 1,000 reforms, as one news article called it. I have had random people knock on my door and ask to take pictures with it, which is bizarre but also kind of funny. I have generally declined, not wanting to turn my home into a circus, but I appreciate that people care about the issue. The generator runs like a dream. I have put probably 50 hours on it through testing and actual use during power outages. It has never failed to start, never given me any trouble. The Honda EU7000 really is an excellent machine, well worth the money. And seeing it sitting there on my porch, properly installed and approved, reminds me every day that standing up for yourself matters. I have thought a lot about what makes someone like Patricia Henderson act the way she did. I think it comes down to power and control. She had been HOA president for years, and people generally did what she said. When I pushed back and refused to comply with what I believed was an unfair rule, it challenged her authority. Rather than accepting that she might be wrong or that compromise was possible, she escalated the conflict until it spiraled out of control. It is a lesson about how even small amounts of power can corrupt people if they are not careful. HOA board members have real authority over people's homes and lives, and that power needs to be checked by accountability and transparency. When boards operate in secret, make arbitrary decisions, and face no consequences for overreach, abuse inevitably follows. The reforms that have been implemented are not perfect, but they are a huge improvement. Homeowners now have real recourse when their HOA oversteps. Board members know they can be held accountable for misconduct, and there is greater transparency in HOA operations, making it harder for corruption to take root. I hope my story serves as a warning to HOA board members everywhere. You are not above the law. You do not have unlimited authority. And if you abuse your power, there will be consequences. Homeowners are not powerless, and when pushed too far, they will fight back. I also hope my story encourages other homeowners dealing with HOA disputes to stand up for themselves. I know it is scary and expensive to fight an HOA. I know it feels like they hold all the cards, but if you are in the right, if you document everything, and if you persist, you can win. Justice may not come quickly or easily, but it can come. As I write this, sitting on my front porch with my generator humming quietly in its enclosure during a test run, I feel a sense of satisfaction. Not just because I won my fight, but because the fight led to changes that help other people. That is the best outcome I could have hoped for. The generator will probably last another 20 years with proper maintenance. Every time I test it, every time I use it during a power outage, I will remember this whole crazy story. And I will be grateful that I live in a country where even when powerful people abuse their authority, ordinary citizens have the tools to fight back and win. My life has returned to normal for the most part. I work from home, take care of my house, and live my life. But I stay engaged with HOA reform efforts and help other homeowners when I can. It is not a crusade or a full-time mission, just something I do when opportunities arise to make a difference. The legal system worked. The reforms are in place. The bad actors faced consequences. And my generator sits on my porch, a symbol of both the problem and the solution. That is all I could ask for.